Good afternoon and welcome to a special broadcast from the National Legislature of a debate on the State of the Nation address, which was delivered by President Jacob Zuma last Thursday. The debate marks the first sitting of the National Assembly for the fifth and final term of the fourth Parliament. The National Assembly has just convened. The Speaker of the National Assembly, Mr. Max Sisulu, is just taking care of housekeeping matters before we get to that debate on the State of the Nation address. The Chief Whip of the Majority Party is expected to lead that debate. As with all other debates in the House, once that the first speaker from the ruling party has had their turn, the official opposition will get her turn as well, and that will be the order that will be followed as the political parties debate what President Jacob Zuma had to say about the state of the nation last week. Now, let's take a look at some of the issues that it highlights some of the issues that the President addressed in his speech last week. Let's start with growth. He said despite the high rate of unemployment, poverty and inequality, South Africa is now a much better place to live in. His greatest concern was the state of the economy, where he said the country needed to boost economic growth to 5% and also warned that strike action in the mining sector should not be allowed to destroy an industry that employed more than 500,000 people. I see on our monitor that the Chief Whip of the Majority Party, Mr. Stone Sizani, has risen to introduce the first motion for the House. Whilst we wait for that discussion to take place, let's take a look at what the President had to say with regard to the economy. He said, in boosting the economy, government will have to work more intensively in developing emerging industrialists. He said many aspirant black industrialists complain about difficulties they experience in obtaining industrial finance, supply and retail markets, and technical production support. On education, the President said much has been achieved through the government's social transformation program. He said there's now a huge increase in the enrollment of children in schools from pre-primary level to tertiary. He also announced that a draft policy framework towards universal access to Grade R has been gazetted for public comment with the view to make Grade R compulsory. Looking at service delivery, President Zuma also outlined some of the government's achievements in the construction of new houses and basic service delivery. He said about 3 million housing units and more than 855,000 serviced sites were delivered since 1994. Let's take a look at the National Assembly getting ready to debate the State of the Nation address that was delivered by President Jacob Zuma last Thursday.
The speech has been printed in the minutes of the joint sitting. I now call upon the Honourable the Minister of Higher Education. Honourable Speaker, the President and the Deputy President, Honourable Cabinet colleagues, Honourable members, ladies and gentlemen and comrades, allow me to start by congratulating our President, Comrade Jacob Zuma, on his State of the Nation address. And his message provided an important interface between the struggle to end oppression up to 1994 and the struggle since then to build a democratic South Africa and bring about development that will benefit all our people, especially the workers and the poor. In other words, this State of the Nation address captures the continuity in these different phases of our struggle, which is an unwavering commitment to a better life for all South Africans. Siyabonga Msholozi. In his address, the President mentioned some of our achievements in education and training, an important dimension of human development, an aspect of our struggle that the ANC has always prioritized. I'll elaborate on this today and also outline how we are planning to meet the challenges that still face us. I will show that, as the President correctly says, we have indeed not just a good story, but as the Minister of Home Affairs would say, we have a good story to tell. nokuthi izwe lakithi seliyindawo engcono kakhulu kunento elaliyilo ngo-1994. South Africa's education and training policies aim to address social and economic challenges facing our country. These include the challenge of inequality, poverty, and high unemployment, as well as persisting underdevelopment in many parts of our country, and a stubborn legacy of Bantu education and skills shortages. This government has, since 1994, developed comprehensive plans to overcome these challenges and has already begun to implement them. These are contained now in our key policy documents such as the NDP, the New Growth Path, the Industrial Policy Action Plan, and other strategic documents, including our white paper on post-school education and training and the key policy documents of the Department of Basic Education. Honorable Speaker, we can stand here proudly and say we have indeed expanded education and training opportunities significantly in our country today. We have achieved almost complete universal attendance at school for those of school-going age. Children are now staying in school longer than ever before. We have also made enormous strides in providing grade R, more than tripling enrollments from 242,000 children in 2001 to 780,000 in 2013. The Karikude Mass Literacy Campaign reached almost 3 million illiterate adults between 2008 and 2012, at an average of 600,000 taught to read and write every year. Lolu hlelo lokufundisa abadala ukufunda nokubhala selifinyelele kubantu abangaphezulu kweyigidi ezintathu abebengakwazi nhlobo ukufunda nokubhala ngaphambilini. Manje sebeyakwazi somlomo nawe mongameli ukuthi A, E, I, O, U nokungaphezulu kwalokho. Since the dawn of democracy in 1994, headcount enrollments in our universities have approximately doubled to almost 1 million students today. We expect a 2/3 increase in university headcount enrollment of over 1.6 million by 2030. We have significantly improved representativity in our universities. In 1994, for example, the proportion of African students in public universities was 55%, while women made up 45%. By 2012, Africans made up 68% of university students and women 58%. In the FET colleges, enrollments have increased by almost 90% over the last 5 years alone, as the President has pointed out. In the period to 2030, headcount enrollments in colleges will grow to 2.5 million. Such growth means we need more institutions. This week, yesterday in fact, the Solplaatje University opened its doors and started its lectures as our brand new university. Tomorrow, the University of Mpumalanga will be starting with its lectures as our 25th university. We are now also engaged, as the President said, in establishing 12 new FET college campuses, all of them in rural areas without exception. Siyilo hulumeni kaKhongolose, oholo umsholozi, sisazokwakha namakolisi emphakathi, community colleges, lapho sizovulela khona amathuba okufunda nokutholakala kwamakhono kulabo abaphuma emazingeni aphansi kakhulu esikoleni. La makolisi sihlela ukuthi abe nabafundi abangaphezulu kwesigidi ngonyaka ka-2030. We have also started construction for the square kilometer array, a major scientific development in our country. The growth of enrollments at all levels and the improvement of its quality has also necessitated expansion and refurbishment of educational infrastructure. At the end of last year, the Minister of Basic Education declared norms and standards for schools' infrastructure to ensure that sustainable quality standards are maintained. The National Department of Basic Education has also become directly involved in improving school infrastructure in areas with the worst backlogs. The Accelerated Schools Infrastructure Delivery Initiative has completed 44 new schools, and 241 schools are currently at various stages of construction or planning. Over and above the efforts of the provincial education departments, the DBE will build 1,000 new schools over the next 5 years to address increases in learner numbers, migration issues, and curriculum needs. And cheers, Iglondawan. As you can see, we really do have a good story to tell. No. We really do have a good story to tell. Infrastructure development also continues apace in our colleges and universities, including the provision of more academic buildings and more and better student residences. Over the past few years, infrastructure funding for university has prioritized the historically disadvantaged institutions, especially those in the former Bantustans, while not ignoring other universities. Of the budget for student residences of 1.78 billion rands in the current medium-term expenditure framework, 1.5 billion is allocated for historically disadvantaged institutions located in rural areas because it is there that the need is greatest. We do, however, continue to care for and to support all our institutions in many different ways. This, I should add, is unlike some of the opposition parties. For example, the UDM is only concerned about the Mthatha campus of Walter Sisulu. That's it. The IFP seems only concerned with the University of Zululand and Mangosuthu University of Technology. The DA, those who come from the former Democratic Party, are concerned about UCT and WITS, and those who come from the National Party who have not changed are only concerned about Stellenbosch and the former UJ. This is the poverty of the bankruptcy of our opposition. Only the ANC cares about the national interest completely. Uthula umholi we-UDM sakha ama-residences ka-40 million eWalter Sisulu. The first since 1976, uthule namhlanje. Kodwa wawubona ngalesa sikhathi ukuthi ngikhahlele kodwa uma sesenza into enhle uthula usho lutho. Ngifuna ukubuza ukuthi uzothini namhlanje. The growth of college and university enrollments has been greatly assisted by the expansion of the National Student Financial Aid Scheme. Since its inception, NSFAS has provided study opportunities to thousands of poor, mainly black students. NSFAS was established in 1999, and since then its growth has been phenomenal. Between 1999 and 2008, the funds managed by NSFAS grew from 441 million rands to 2.3 billion rands, and in the last 5 years, the amount made available through NSFAS has grown over 300% to over 9 billion rands. That's a sign of the commitment, amongst other things, of this government and our president in particular to prioritizing education. Abafundi, lalela-ke James, before ukhulume kakhulu. Abafundi asebesizakele kulomxhaso wezimali zakahulumeni sebengaphezulu kuka 1.4 million. Selokhu sasungulwa lesikhwama ngo-1999. Ngo-1999 kwahlomula abafundi abawu 41,000. Kulo nyaka kuzohlomula abafundi abawu 430,000. Ngaphambi kuka-2011 bekuhlomula abafundi basemanyuvesi kuphela. Manje sekuhlomula nabasemakolishi abaqeqeshele ezamakhono. Sebeze okokuqala abazoba ngaphezulu kwabafundi abasemanyuvesi abazohlomula kulesikhwama esithi National Student Financial Aid Scheme. Lesikhwama sokusiza abafundi abahluphekayo emanyuvesi nasemakolishi sesenza umehluko omkhulu emndenini entulayo kulelizwe lakithi. Iningi labafundi abahlomulayo bangabokuqala emlandweni yemndeni yabo ukuthola iziqu zemfundo ephakeme. They are the first graduates. Impela Nxamalala, imnandi le ndaba ephethwe uhulumeni inoju. As the President said in his State of the Nation address, education is a ladder out of poverty for millions of our people. Expanding the education and training system is as equally important as also improving quality. For this reason, we are paying a great deal of attention to improving quality, including very centrally improving of teaching and learning. Our matric results are the most public demonstration on the achievements we've made in terms of improving quality. The annual national assessments introduced in 2011 were administered to grades 3, 6, and 9 in 2013, and they show a definite overall improvement in children's literacy and numeracy. The results of the 2011 Trends in International Maths and Science Study provide the first indication from an internationally testing system that substantial quality improvements are occurring in the South African schooling system. In the post-school system too, we are making substantial effort to improve the throughput rates in all institutions. We are strengthening governance, upgrading lecturer qualifications, providing better career guidance, as well as expanding postgraduate studies. Particular attention is being paid to the development of the scarce and critical skills needed for South Africa's economic development, such as the production of engineers, artisans, technicians, machine operators, project managers, and financial managers. We are also strengthening and revitalizing humanities and social sciences in our universities. In the area of education and training for people with disabilities, we've made some important interventions as well. Department of Basic Education declared 2013 as the year of inclusive education to focus attention on education for the disabled. A special area of focus, Mr. President, as you also said in your speech, has been the development of a South African Sign Language curriculum for grades R to grade 12 for phased-in introduction. In the post-school space, we are also making some strides. Students with disabilities are now eligible for dedicated financial aid, and this year we have set aside 66 million rands for bursaries exclusively for students with disabilities. And these are full bursaries, including assistive devices. We are also funding one-of-a-kind college that we have here in the Western Cape on the National Institution for the Deaf. And one of our flagship projects is to promote apprenticeships, learnerships, and other forms of work-integrated learning, to strengthen partnership with employers, and to ensure that our students do get workplace experience. I'm proud to say, Honorable Speaker and President, that government has led by example with regard to linking education and the workplace in line with the National Skills Accord. State-owned enterprises have significantly stepped up their training programs, and government at all levels is taking the need for training more seriously. Thousands of young college and university graduates are now working as interns in national, provincial, and local government departments, and we have every expectation that the numbers will continue increasing. But shame on the Democratic Alliance. You are the only province that is not sending our students to go and train as doctors in Cuba. It's shame on you, because for whatever reasons, we are depriving the poor kids from Khayelitsha, Gugulethu, and many other places to go and train as doctors. Honorable members, all in all, as the President has said, we have a good story to tell. This is in contrast also to the official opposition parties that want us to pull stunts like marching to the house or try to enhance their leadership cliques with dodgy rent-a-black schemes. Honorable members, in fact, actually, we are offended, many of us, by this. Black people are not for renting. It shows the extent to which the Democratic Alliance does not treat black people with respect in this country. Of course, it does not mean also that black leaders should not be proud of themselves and not allow themselves to be rented. How on earth do you go and appoint a presidential candidate without the knowledge of your membership? You sitting right here, we are not agreeing. We know that some of you are very angry because you were not consulted about that. And how can we trust you to run an open and democratic government when you can't even consult your own membership about your own presidential candidate? The reason is simple. You have no story to tell. Whilst we, under the leadership of President Zuma, have a good story to tell. This thing of marching to is cheap headline-grabbing thing. And we know the real reason. Your own internal research, Lindy, Honorable Member Masibuko, I'm sorry. Your own internal research is telling you that we are in for an electoral drubbing this year. That is why we are panicking. That is why we are panicking doing what we are doing. Honorable Speaker and honorable members, we still have many, many challenges ahead of us, and we know them. And it is only the African National Congress that is best capable of addressing those needs. Today, listen to this one. Today, a child from a poor family is likely to live beyond 5 years. Get free health care for the first 5 years. Benefit from early childhood development programs. Attend a grade R class. Attend a no-fee school with at least guaranteed 1 meal per day. And thereafter access NSFAS to go to college or university and become an artisan or an engineer or even a university professor. We have done a lot, and we have a good story to tell. I'm challenging you, you're coming to speak after me. Let's hear your good story, what is going to do. Mongameli, somlomo nawe mongameli. Hayi. Ukhongolo suyiphethe indaba. Zinhle. Zinomsoco. Zinonile. Ziyazoyiza. Sifuna ukuthi well done mongameli ngokuthi usikhokhele kulo hulumeni ukuthi sikwazi ukwenza zonke lezi zinto esizenzayo njengamanje. Asinganaki abasibuyisele emuva, asizibheke thina esiyaphambili. Siyabonga kakhulu.
I thank the honourable member. I now wish to invite the honourable, the leader of the opposition.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, Honourable President, honourable members. Today we live in a country that is undoubtedly better than it was in 1994. We are the the South Africa of President Nelson Mandela. We are the nation that inspires hope throughout the world. We overcame apartheid. We fought injustice and joined hands in reconciliation. Our audacity to unite when some believed it could not be done continues to be a beacon of light for the rest of the world. Despite hundreds of years of oppression and discrimination, South Africans remain proud of our country and hopeful for the future, bursting with potential. That potential lies kilometers beneath the earth, in the great seams of platinum and ore that brave men and women carve out of the rocks beneath us each and every day. It is loud in the factories of Johannesburg and Nelson Mandela Bay Metro that pioneer the technology of tomorrow. It is in Cape Town's creative studios where world-class designs are born, and on the farms that sweep across the Free State and KwaZulu-Natal. South Africa is a country of great potential. And we in the Democratic Alliance believe in that potential with all of our hearts. This is indeed a good story to tell. But Mr. Speaker, there's another story that we didn't hear in this chamber last Thursday night. That is the story of President Jacob Zuma and his ANC. It is the story of 5 years of poor leadership which have reversed much of the progress we have made as a nation. It is the story of a presidency that lacks both the political will and the credibility to do what is needed to keep South Africa on the path of our predecessors. Mr. Speaker, South Africans yearn for a bold plan of action from the president. They want a vision for the future, a way out of the crises that have engulfed our nation over the last 5 years. But on Thursday night, they were left disappointed once again. During his State of the Nation address, the Honourable President gave a review of 20 years of democracy as an attempt to bury the many failures over which his administration has presided. But there are real stories to be told about the last 5 years of ANC government, stories that South Africans know all too well. Mr. Speaker, the Honourable President says the ANC has a good story to tell about the economy. But South Africans have a very different story to tell. Theirs is a story of frustration. Does the President feel the hopelessness of the young man amongst the 7 million who have been robbed of their dignity by unemployment? The man who comes home empty-handed, who feels like a disappointment to his family and his children. Unemployment is not just a statistic, Mr. Speaker. It is a cold, hard reality. It is a reality for far too many South Africans because our government does not have the courage to break the stranglehold that the ANC's alliance partners in COSATU and the SACP have on labour policy. That is why President Zuma has only managed to create 561,000 out of the 5 million jobs he promised in 2009. Just one job out of every 10 jobs promised. That is why there are a staggering 1.4 million more unemployed South Africans today than on the day the Honourable President took office in 2009. What is his plan to address this crisis? The only tangible plan announced on Thursday is to create so-called work opportunities in the expanded public works program. Let me say clearly, Mr. Speaker, that work opportunities and real jobs are not the same thing. EPWP work opportunities are important for poverty alleviation and for basic skills transfer, but real jobs are sustainable, they are private sector oriented, and they rely on the government implementing good economic policies. South Africa's recent economic performance, however, has been dismal. The Honourable President blames this on the 2008 global financial crisis, or what he refers to as a global meltdown. But on our very doorstep, Sub-Saharan Africa's economic growth forges ahead without us. Nigeria is forecast to overtake South Africa as the largest economy in Africa in the next 2 years. While our economy grew at under 2% last year, our emerging peers like Chile and Malaysia are growing at more than double this rate. Why this great disparity? Because economic growth and job creation require visionary leadership and a single economic plan. South Africa has neither of these. We saw this again on Thursday night. The Honourable President told the nation repeatedly that the National Development Plan is the blueprint that will guide all government policy. But then he claimed that the NDP incorporates key targets of the Industrial Policy Action Plan, the New Growth Path, and the Infrastructure Plan. This kind of vague leadership provides no incentive for investors. How can the Honourable President commit to all three of these plans when they are totally at odds with one another? The answer is that the President puts what is in his own interests first. Political survival always trumps real leadership. This is the real story of South Africa's frustration. Mr. Speaker, the Honourable President says that the ANC has a good story to tell on service delivery. But South Africans have a very different story to tell about the past 5 years. It is a story of desperation. Under President Zuma's ANC, there have been 5 times more service delivery protests per year than between 2004 and 2009. And no, Honourable President, the people who protest against your government are certainly not happy with your service delivery record. They are desperate for change. I witnessed this firsthand when I visited Muthutlung in the Northwest Province, following the violent protests there, which claimed the lives of 4 South Africans. I saw that the real problem is corruption and failed service delivery in the ANC-led municipality of Madibeng. For years, the municipality has not maintained its municipal water infrastructure. After 2 years of only intermittent access to water, and in sheer desperation, the people of Muthutlung finally exercised their right to protest against their failed government. One of the young men who died during this protest is Osia Rahube. I would like to tell his story today. Osia's mother, Elizabeth, describes him as a God-fearing and law-abiding citizen. She told me that he was a down-to-earth young man who made friends with everyone he met. He was just 30 years old when he was killed. Osia was not an instigator of violence. He was not a criminal. He was an innocent young man with his entire life ahead of him. He sympathized with those in his community who were fighting to ensure that he and his family had clean water to drink. His story is the story of many others. Honourable Speaker, police brutality is a blight on the many honest, brave SAPS police officers who take to the streets every day to protect and serve our nation. This kind of brutality is, however, a relic of the apartheid past. It should never have re-emerged in our young democracy, but under this government's leadership, it has intensified. The government's response has been inadequate. The Honourable President ignores the NDP recommendation to demilitarize the police. He has failed to introduce a proper public order policing policy, and he refuses to do what is right and what should have been done after Marikana more than a year ago, and fire the Minister of Police, the Honourable Nathi Mthethwa, from his cabinet. So while South Africa burns, the Honourable President continues to value political loyalty over a turnaround in our police service. This is the real story of South Africa's desperation. Mr. Speaker, the President said that the ANC has a good story to tell on combating crime. But South Africans have a very different story to tell about the past 5 years. It is a story of fear. We cannot say that we are winning the war against crime when the latest statistics show increases in murder and attempted murder and other serious contact crimes. What do we say to the mothers and the fathers of the more than 85,000 South Africans who were murdered since 2007? Or to the 333,374 survivors of reported sexual offenses during the same period? I know what it's like to bury someone you love because of violence. It is a pain that haunts you forever. I know too that it burns more painfully when there is no justice for that crime. Why didn't the President speak about the need to improve conviction rates and of the challenges in our criminal justice system? If we are to win the war on crime, then this government needs a new and comprehensive plan to address it. But the Honourable President and his government have none. Mr. Speaker, The Honourable President says that the ANC has a good story to tell on the fight against corruption. But South Africans have a very, very different story to tell about the past 5 years. It is a story of greed. At the heart of this story is the over 30 billion rand which is stolen from our people's pockets every single year. 30 billion rand. A theft that deprives them of quality services and job opportunities while enriching politically connected insiders at their expense. This is the reason, Mr. Speaker, that we have dropped some 22 places in the Transparency International ratings for corruption during this term of office. How can we take the Honourable President seriously when he says that fighting corruption within the public service is yielding results? Because we all know that he doesn't have a single ounce of credibility on this matter. How can he, when the 200 million rand upgrade of his private residence at Nkandla is the gold standard for corruption in South Africa today? This is not a presidency which fights for accountability. It runs from it. Mr. Speaker, the events of the past 2 hours in the Western Cape High Court reveal the extent to which this government tolerates corruption at the very, very top. The Minister of Public Works, the Honourable Thulas Nxesi, has revealed to me in a replying affidavit that his task team report into Nkandla never contained any security-sensitive information. In fact, the report that was released to the public by government in December 2013 is the very same report that Minister Nxesi classified as top secret in January of the same year. This means that the minister, before this House and on many other occasions, misled South Africans into believing the classification was necessary to conceal information that was never even there in the first place. He forced Parliament to collude with this charade by instructing you, Honourable Speaker, to refer the task team report to the closed Standing Committee on Intelligence, all in an effort to conceal this so-called top secret information which never existed in the first place. It's clear now that this cynical classification was intended only to protect President Zuma from embarrassment and from being held accountable for the extent of this scandal. We have won the case with cost today. But the fight will continue. The fight will continue, and this is why I have today tabled a motion calling for the Honourable Minister to be investigated for deliberately misleading this House. But, Mr. Speaker, this is only part of the problem. The President himself does not respond to the people's demands for transparency and accountability. President Zuma claimed ignorance on national television this week. He said he didn't know about the 200 million rand upgrade. And he said, honourable members, that he will not resign because of it. If the President honours the principle of good governance and if he wants to restore any semblance of a legacy, he should reconsider this position. In fact, he should have resigned the moment the story broke that more than 200 million rands of public money was spent on his private home. I want to use this opportunity to send a very clear message to our honourable members that should the Honourable President be implicated in any wrongdoing in the Public Protector's report on the Nkandla scandal, I will not hesitate to table a motion to impeach him in this House. And while I cannot guarantee that we will win the vote, I know that from FNB Stadium in Gauteng to the forgotten people of Mototong, millions of South Africans will be calling for us to do the right thing. They know the real story, that our country cannot afford another 5 years of President Zuma's administration. Mr. Speaker, as we remember the legacy of our beloved President Nelson Mandela, we owe it to ourselves and to the young people who hold the future of our country in their hands to bring back the good story. We in the Democratic Alliance are working hard to do this. Let me tell you about the good story that is yet to come. It is a story of hope. We will overturn the story of frustration by fully adopting the National Development Plan, opening South Africa for business, and creating 6 million real jobs. We will rewrite the story of greed by enforcing a zero-tolerance policy for those who cheat the nation and misuse its resources. And we will end the story of fear by demilitarizing the police service and combating the fundamental problems in our criminal justice system. This is the good story, Mr. Speaker, which we will tell in 2019 when the ANC government is finally pushed below 50% at the national level. This is the story of the Democratic Alliance on the rise. South Africans saw it in the streets of Johannesburg last week. They will see it in the weeks to come, and they will surely see it at the ballot box on the 7th of May, 2014. The time for those who enrich themselves is over. Change is coming to South Africa. Province by province, ward by ward, street by street. We will restore the good story in South Africa, and we will deliver on the promise of freedom for all. I thank you.
I thank the honourable member. I now wish to invite the Honourable Likota to the podium. Honourable Likota.
Honourable Speaker, when the President took the oath of office, he said, among other things, that he intended or he would uphold and advance the Constitution of our country. And I was filled with hope that he would indeed move in this direction. Sadly, the President chose to turn himself into a prophet. He announced to the country that the African National Congress would rule until Jesus Christ comes back. Now, this is a very significant prophecy. And I thought that it must be somewhere in the pages of the Holy Book. It's a very significant prophecy. But it is a false prophecy. It is not in the Bible. It is not in the Quran. It is not in the Bhagavad Gita. It is not in any of the known books written by prophets in the history of the world. Instead of teaching the people of our country that democracy has to do with them evaluating government every 5 years to see whether they would like to return it to government or not, he chose to be a prophet and failed to live up to this promise of upholding and advancing the Constitution. So the church leaders of our country, Christians, black and white, rich and poor, must reject this false prophecy. What I can tell you is that it's somewhere in the Bible it says, there will be false prophets. That is there in the Bible. You will find it there. I was saddened that the leader of our country has no respect and takes the name of Jesus Christ in vain. It is not in keeping with the lessons that those of us who grew up in Christian churches and Christian schools and homes have come to know. Our country must reject leadership that has no respect for the faith of the majority of its people. We cannot have false prophets who pretend to be what they are not. But you see, that was not all. When it seemed that that false prophecy was not holding out, he now did something even stranger. He told us ukuthi abaphansi bazosijezisa uma ngabe singavoteli ANC. Umhlola. Wajika ke manje, uyasikhogisa manje. Ukuthi sesabe manje. Ukuthi i-constitution ithi there must be freedom of conscience. Ayikho engqondweni yakhe ke mhlolo. So soyike manje so vote ngokusaba manje ukuthi sojeziswa. Ngamaphi lamadlozi afuna ukuthi thina sivote labantu abantshontsha imali yesizwe na. Asinawo thina amakhosi yanjalo. Abanjalo asinabo abaphansi abanjalo. Abekho abake basifundisa ukuthi ukuntshontsha into elungileyo. Angeke kunjalo kusho ukuthi angeke basijezise ngoba siyenza lento basifundisa ukuthi akulungile ukuntshontsha ikakhulukazi ukuntshontsha abantu abahluphekileyo. Uri no badimu batarotla hai baning risa vote African National Congress. Now, you know, in the first place, if this false prophecy was somewhere in the holy books, the struggle against apartheid would have ended very quickly. Because all these people who were governing all of that time, they would have seen it in the holy book, that you must stand down for the African National Congress because it must govern until Jesus comes back. Ayikho ke leyo nto. Yabona, you are taking the approach under this leadership that the bigger the lie, the more convincing it is. Nisithembisa imisebenzi e500,000. Uma engenzeki niza ne6 million job opportunities. Isingisi esiningi esingasho lutho. Because abantu abanayo imisebenzi. Abantu abanayo into bayidlayo. Into ke mina engifuna ukuyisho ke yile angeke thina sokhogizwe ngabaphansi abathi sivotela abantu abantshontsha imali yethu baye Switzerland ngayo bahambe baye New York baye Mexico babuye lana bamkeleke nje ngabantu abayenza umsebenzi omuhle ezweni. Ngeke siyenze leyo nto. But let me tell you this. South Africa today is less happier than when President Mbeki was driven out of office. So sad. And the reasons are clear. When he left office, this country virtually did not owe anybody. Today, in less than 5 years, this country is now almost R1 trillion in debt. Ayikho imali nichithile nidlile bafowethu. Ayikho. And this is how you have done it. This is how niyenze kanje. Ngo-2010, 2011, just Terence Mbembe says, in fruitless and futile expenditure, 20 billion rand disappeared in your hands. Sisayifuna namanje. Have that money not disappeared, 20 billion rand, the students of our nation would not be running up the street, getting arrested, insisting and demanding money for education, for fees. Angazi ukuthi uplay honorable Nzimande okhuluma ngayo. Abantwana bethu bayaboshwa lapha phandle. Bayadutshulwa amaphoyisa ema-university. Because 20 billion rand disappeared in this administration's hands. 2010, 2011. But as if that is not all. The following year, in 2011, 2012, you didn't improve. 25 billion rand disappeared in your hands. That's why abantu bangena zindlu. Imali bekumele yakhele abantu izindlu. Inyamalele ezandleni zenu 25 billion rand. Abantu basekhaya elitsha balala emanzini. Magnetic. 25 billion rands iphelele ezandleni zenu. Siyayifuna bafowethu imali yethu. Buyisani imali yabantu base South Africa. Siyayifuna bafowethu leyo mali leyo. So abantu base Fixburg abanamanzi abana electricity ngoba i25 billion rand ivele yachitheka lapha ezandleni zenu. You have to think again before you do this. And you see, of course, this year, you've done even worse. You outdid yourself. 30 billion rand. This past year, 30 billion rand. So, is it any wonder township after township in the provinces you govern are going up in flames? And when people complain about that, the Honorable President says, no, it's because we have provided everything for everybody, and 95%, there's only a small 5% and so on. In my own hometown, people are drinking water that's stinking, sewage. Many of the children died there because of cholera. In all of the years of my life, it's the first time historian and it's only, that's why I say, after President Mbeki was driven from office, I'm talking only about that time. The good story is when President Mandela was president. It is when President Mbeki was president, because we didn't owe anybody. We paid all the debt. So what did you do with this money? What did you do with 20 plus 25, which is 45 plus 30? And there's more. What did you do with it? Fruitless and futile. You can't explain it. You must explain to our people. So now our people must go to the voting stations. And they must vote for those who will not allow money to disappear in their hands. That is what our people must go and do. On the 7th of May, all our people, the students who don't have money for education, the people that have no homes, who have no homes, the people who have no sewage services, who have no water, they must go and vote out a government that has wasted so much of their money, so that they put in there men and women who are committed to making sure that the budget of the nation benefits them. They must do so for those who fear God, who don't think they can steal in the darkness and nobody will see, who will not declare that they will be in power until Jesus Christ comes back. You will be there as long as you do the will of God. If you're not doing the will of God, if you are stealing the money, if you are lying to the people, if you are intimidating the people with all kinds of chimeras, you will not succeed. You will not get there. So now I'm telling you the happier story, and I'm telling that until you correct and take the country back to where it was when you took it from President Thabo Mbeki, until you do that, you must come to terms with the fact that you have failed our nation. At the present time, businessmen and women of our country are sitting with huge quantities of money, terrified and uncertain that they can invest their money and there will be returns. So they are sitting with high liquidity. They are refusing to invest. not because they don't love their country, but you have created such a huge uncertainty that they are not doing it. We will create a situation in which they can feel confidence in their country, invest the money in this country, persuade others abroad to come and invest in this country, because this is the country Nelson Mandela freed. This is the country in which he laid the foundation so that our people can live in peace and live together, knowing that every day that passes takes them forward to where a better life lies. There's also talk, which, by the way, the Honorable President has made. He said that he wants to change the Constitution. He says he wants to change the Constitution. I've been listening carefully to hear what is it that he wants to change of the legacy of Mandela, Oliver Tambo, Sisulu, and others. What is it he wants to change? His spokesperson says I must ask him, because he did not make the speech, so I must ask umongameli. Kodwa umongameli akasitshela ukuthi yini le afuna ukuyishintsha kule constitution. Mzukwana nayichitha le constitution, you will be breaking the only glue that is keeping the people of South Africa together. You will be creating a situation which you will never be able to control and contain. And unfortunately, you will not be there when future generations in this country will suffer the consequences of your serious blunders. Many of you have already been talking about how this constitution is just for enemies of South Africa. That suggests that even Nelson Mandela was an enemy of the people of South Africa, according to you, because why did he negotiate this constitution and give it to us as the reliable path into the future? All the critical voices come from amongst yourselves.
Honourable Member, your time has expired. I now wish to invite the Honourable M.G. Buthelezi to the podium. Shenge.
Honorable Speaker, Kamela, Your Excellency, our President, Mangalala, Your Excellency, Deputy President, Mpulua, Honorable Ministers, Honorable Deputy Ministers, Honorable Members. This year, as I rise to this podium, I do so with a keen sense of awareness of the absence of the Honorable Mr. Ben Skosana, Member of Parliament. Our party mourns his loss, and we're still shaken by the sudden nature of his passing in honor of a stalwart colleague and friend. I pay tribute to this vast contribution that he made both in this House and also beyond the walls of this House. The Honorable Ms. Kosana will be remembered with deepest respect and deepest love. And I would like to thank you, Mr. President, for your condolences in your speech on the passing away of our House chairperson. Colleagues, as we celebrate 20 years of democracy, we give due respect to the enormous strides made by ordinary South Africans to overcome the legacy of our past and create a new country in which freedom and equality prevail. We have good reason to be proud of our people. Having been a Minister of State for 10 years of our freedom, under President Mandela and President Mbeki, I cannot say that government has done nothing for our people in our country. But unfortunately, since those days, those first years, we have surely lost our way. Considering this last quarter of our democratic era, one blatant truth demands to be spoken, Mr. President, under your watch. This government has failed South Africa. 20 years ago, words like rainbow nation, miracle transition, freedom, and reconciliation filled the public discourse. And under your leadership, sir, those words have become Marikana, scandal, protest, corruption. We saw more than 2 of your ministers defenestrated because of maladministration. And we saw the National Commissioner of Police being dismissed because of that. The leadership of our country under your watch, sir, is a far cry from the leadership of 20 years ago. It is far removed from the kind of leadership we received from Dr. Pixika Isaga Seme, Dr. John Dube, Reverend Mahato, Reverend Mahabane, Dr. Morocco, Nkos Albert Lutul, and other prominent past leaders of the ANC. Under your watch, Your Excellency, the ANC has become a caricature of its former self, almost unrecognizable as the old liberation movement that helped usher in democracy in our country. Under your watch, Mr. President, dignity has shuffled off the stage of politics following the quiet exit of integrity. The question is whether we can reverse the damage and heal our nation. Beyond question is the obvious fact that to do so, we must remove the greatest obstacle to our success. Before we ever entered democracy, His Excellency Nelson Mandela warned the Congress of South African Trade Unions to be vigilant and to watch for a time such as this. In July 1993, he said, and I quote him, "If the ANC does to you what the apartheid government did to you, then you must do to the ANC what you did to the apartheid government," unquote. Then, in October 1998, the chairperson of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, His Grace Archbishop Desmond Tutu, echoed Madiba's sentiments when he said, and I quote him, "We can't assume that yesterday's oppressed will not become tomorrow's oppressors. We have seen it happen all over the world and should not be surprised if it happens here," unquote. He said this in reaction to the ANC's fury that the TRC would dare expose war crimes of the African National Congress and name the party as the common denominator in the black-on-black violence of our past. Straying outside the official narrative to speak the truth about the ANC makes one extremely unpopular. Ask me, I know. There is one word that is never mentioned in the ANC today, despite being the greatest legacy of our icon, President Nelson Mandela. That word is reconciliation. When you spoke of social cohesion, Mr. President, all you mentioned was the Soccer World Cup. Well, that is as close as you came to addressing the fact that our nation is still divided, still carries old wounds, and is opening new ones. And I must thank you, Your Excellency, for paying tribute to families across the political spectrum who lost loved ones during the violence of our past. But why, Mr. President, when you speak on the black-on-black violence of the 80s and 90s, do you speak only of state-sponsored violence? The ANC's People's War claims some 20,000 black lives in violence between parties on both sides. Counter-violence, revenge violence, predominantly aimed at securing political hegemony after liberation. Why did President Mbeki ask for amnesty for himself and other leaders of the ANC? I don't remember whether your name is in the list as well, sir. Calling all the violence state-sponsored denies all accountability and responsibility. How, Mr. President, does that foster reconciliation? Your condolences to IFE families who lost mothers, children, and uncles have little meaning in the absence of honesty. The wounds of the past will not disappear of their own accord. Surely we have learned that lesson. It is painful, but I cannot stand in this House, Mr. Speaker, in good conscience and say that today's ANC is the ANC in which I cut my political teeth. It is not the same creature. It is hideously transformed. So despite the attacks that will no doubt follow and the murmurs I'm hearing already, I'm saying today what every South African is thinking: how far have we fallen from Mandela's South Africa? We have lowered the bar from what is considered a grade 12 pass mark to what is considered a respectable leader. In response to Your Excellency's last State of the Nation address, I said, standing on this podium, that although you are the leader of the ruling party, you are still my president. And I would resent it if your actions portrayed you as a leader who speaks from both sides of your mouth. There is no country in the world in which duplicity is accepted in a president. Yet when you began your term, sir, of office, you promised to create 500,000 jobs. Instead, 1 million jobs were lost. Now, at the end of your term, you promised to create 6 million jobs. I fear for what the future holds. Let us not consistently insult the intelligence of our people. Let us not promise them an El Dorado which we cannot deliver. Strong nations are not built on promises. They are built on truth and honest leadership. Can we not hear the cry of our people as they bend tires, throw bricks, and lose their lives to protest against government? Are we deaf to the cry of the wounded, the helpless, the sick? Can we not hear the impoverished weeping? Mr. President, you kept returning last week to the pretty refrain, we have a good story to tell. I cannot think of a more imaginative story than the one you weaved, sir, about service delivery protests. These protests, you said, President, are not the result of government's failures, but the result of government successes. And I quote you, sir, success is the breeding ground of rising expectations, unquote. No, Mr. President. Promises raise expectations, and when promises are broken, people protest. These are your people, sir, members of the ANC, who are engaging in violent protests against their government. It is not a case of playing party politics. And I'm quite amazed, Mr. Speaker, Your Excellency, by the uncalled for attack by the Minister of Higher Education on the IFP for its role in creating the University of Zululand and the Mangosuthu University of Technology during the ANC's era of liberation, now education data. I created the Mangosuthu University of Technology with private funding, as the Zulu government received a shoestring budget from the Pretoria regime because of our rejection of the policy of apartheid, of balkanizing our country to many states. I did all this as a cadre of the ANC on the instructions, or no less a person than Nkosi Albert Luthuli and Oliver Tambo, on behalf of the ANC. Nothing can change that truth. You can murmur until cows come home. I have a credible witness in this house, and a stalwart of the liberation struggle, in my sister, Mrs. Winnie Nomzamo Mandela. You can't even ignore her book where she says these things. When she visited Bekkersdal, Mrs. Mandela said, and I quote her in her presence, "I'm deeply hurt that I've seen no changes since 1994 when I was here with Chris Hani. It's not acceptable that I should be driving over sewage in Bekkersdal." And I'm surprised that the minister should attack me when, in fact, he actually lectured at the Mangosuthu Technikon. And it reminds me of my great-grandfather, King Dinizulu's mother. When my grandfather, King Dinizulu, was exiled at St. Helena, his mother actually acted as regent. And he formed a regiment, Udakwa Kusuta. Wabantu bayadakwa kusuta. Your Excellency, to me, the National Development Plan is the best wish list for our country thus far. But our enthusiasm for the development plan has been dampened by the fact that some of the tripartite partners of the ruling party reject it. From experience, we know that when one of the tripartite allies sneezes, the ruling party catches a cold. This was exemplified by COSATU's rejection of President Begi's macroeconomic policy of growth, employment, and redistribution. Mr. President, if there were any certainty that the NDP will be implemented, South Africans may have reason to forgive you for any of your errors. The National Development Plan has the potential to be your greatest legacy, sir. But will it ever be implemented? Your warning that the strikes that take place at the drop of a hat can ruin our country was well said, sir. I remember that President Mbeki, when we were deputy president, actually asked you to address the issue of our rigid labor laws when you are deputy president. The warning that the weak exchange rate which you made poses a significant risk to inflation has put anxiety in the hearts of our people, who feel helpless in the face of the rising cost of living. And what hope do you offer them, Mr. President? Little more than the trite response you made that we must work together and do the right things. The administration has lost touch with the daily reality of its people. Rather than talking about how many cubic liters of jet fuel we can transport in a year, let's talk about the senseless loss of lives on our roads. Rather than simply thinking the many NGOs who lead the fight against abuse of women and children, let's ask why government fails to back these organizations financially. Why are so many vital non-profit service providers constantly on the brink of closure? There is money to be spent on these noble causes, but it is likely that this money is among the billions that are lost to, quote, unauthorized, irregular, wasteful, and fruitless expenditure, in the words of the Auditor General. We can talk about 320 million that has been recovered through the National Anti-Corruption Court line, but why do we not talk about the 24.8 billion lost by provincial departments through maladministration? The 10 hospitals that have been built or refurbished look far less impressive against 24 hospitals that could be built with the mismanaged money, hospital of the same standard as the 1 billion rand Nelson Mandela Children's Hospital. In the same way, we can talk about inordinately delayed successes of the land reform program. But why don't we talk about 59 million rand worth of farms lost through corruption in the land reform program, or farms to the value of 52 million that are still under investigation? Mr. President, you have told us that the battle against HIV is one of the biggest achievements of this administration. Just how quickly it is forgotten that the IFP had to join the TAC in the Constitutional Court's case as amicus curiae to force government to roll out antiretroviral to prevent mother-to-child transmission of HIV. The IFP was already doing it in KwaZulu-Natal, but it took the Constitutional Court to force the ANC to follow suit. So the biggest achievement of this administration has in fact been emulating the leadership of the IFP. I spent my life tending to the wounded. I know what it means to stand alone, to suffer injustice, and to mourn. I therefore long to heal this new sickness that has come upon our nation, the sickness of dishonest leadership. As you know, Your Excellency, I'm from a generation of leaders like Oliver Tambo, Walter Sisulu, Nelson Mandela, Govan Mbeki, Rowley Arenstein, Alpheus Zulu, Zami Kongo, Robert Sobukwe, Steve Biko, John Matthews. And in this hall, I would say it's only the Honorable Mr. Andrew Mlangeni and perhaps Mr. Mandela and I who survived from that generation. By circumstances of history, Mr. Mlangeni and I have become the custodians of a political era in which integrity, morality, and righteous leadership prevailed. For the sake of our future, I've imbued this value into a party that will continue long after I'm gone. I will have no shame over my legacy, for I worked on the side of what is true and right. The party I founded continues on this path and is perhaps the last light of a political era our nation can be proud of. Mr. Speaker, Your Excellency, and honorable members, I apologize to no one for the fact that when Inkatha was founded in 1975, with the approval of Mr. Oliver Tambo, it was structured on the ideals of nonviolence and negotiations propounded by the founding fathers of the ANC in 1912. I was vilified for pursuing this path. Just as Madiba was bad-mouthed by some of you when he started negotiating with the regime while he was still in prison. Yet would not be where the country is today had both of us not pursued those negotiations. It is odd then, Your Excellency, that after the State of the Nation address, our brothers and sisters in the South on that side of the aisle started singing one of Mkhonto weSizwe songs. How does this nature reconciliation to which Madiba dedicated his life? Well, on the 7th of May 2014, I pray that the people of goodwill choose to maintain a connection with South Africa's former glory, not by blindly continuing their poor imitation of a party that has long since lost its principles, but by creating continuity with the South Africa of 1994 and by voting for my party. Continuing down the present path, democracy will surely perish, but there is hope to change course and begin to heal. On the 7th of May, South Africa will visit the trauma unit whether we emerge healed or dying is up to the electorate. It is thus grossly irresponsible to promise that what one cannot deliver and to hide what has gone wrong under a thin veneer of sporadic successes. It is equally irresponsible to ply the electorate with food parcels and to campaign with state resources. It is irresponsible to make statements about our ancestors and the way into heaven, or about businessmen securing business through a party donation. South Africa deserves a free and fair election, not only in the rhetorical sense, but in fact. Voters deserve to know the truth, whether that truth is about multi-million rand security upgrades or crime statistics. Voters deserve to know why the ruling party ignored the will of the people for such an inordinately long time when we spoke with one voice against the security bill. Voters deserve to know. There is a pain in our nation, Your Excellency, and no amount of sweet talking is going to remove it. We need to get to the heart of the sickness and heal our nation. I and my party stand ready to do that, hand in hand with the people of goodwill. You can vilify me, you can hate me, that will be nothing new for me. But the time has come to prescribe something more than an antibiotic. The time has come for an amputation so that our country can move forward without the dead weight of a leadership that no longer leads with integrity. Only then will the state of the nation address begin to reflect the truth. Only then can we begin to heal. Ngamalal, Sholos.
I thank the Honourable Speaker. I now wish to invite the Honourable the Minister of Women, Children and People with Disabilities, the Honourable the Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Honourable Speaker, may I remind the Honourable Chief Buthelezi that if Tatu Sisulu, Mbeki, Mandela, if Luthuli, if Reverend Mahabane were all here, they would be sitting this side of the House. I wish to remind the honorable leaders that Mandela is sitting in the ANC branch as we speak. I wish to remind honorable members that he has also paid his membership fees to the ANC through his royalties that will forever go to the African National Congress. Ngifuna ukukhumbuza usisi Lindiwe ukuthi mayesazi konke kangaka. Why did the DA rent a Mampila face for president? Ngifuna ukumbuza ukuthi ube kuphi ma i-corruption beyithola lapha ku-Premier of the Western Cape enika i-advisor yakhe i-tender la kule government yase Western Cape. Ube kuphi ma kunama service delivery protest asekhaya licha eGugulethu naseDawuni. Ube kuphi wethuleleni? I want to agree with the unwavering assertion made by President Jacob Zuma during his State of the Nation address when he stated that South Africa is a much better place to live in now than it has been before. Nkumbuze Honorable Terra, if you can't run a Poppy Hayes party like Cope, how can you ever run South Africa? Indeed, Mr. President, the liberation brought for the first time the promise of gender equality. The path towards the mainstreaming of gender equality was paved by the late former President Nelson Mandela 20 years ago during his inaugural State of the Nation address when he stated, and I quote, "Freedom cannot be achieved unless women have been emancipated from all forms of oppression," unquote. Madiba made a call that the condition of the women of our country must radically be changed for the better. and that they must be empowered to intervene in all aspects of life as equals with any other member of society. The realization of women's empowerment and gender equality in South Africa remain guided by his words under the leadership of the African National Congress. As a result, today, we stand here and boldly declare that South Africa is a much better place to live in now than it has ever been before. The establishment of the Ministry of Women, Children and People with Disabilities by the Honorable President Jacob Zuma in 2009 stands as a testament of this commitment to promote, facilitate, coordinate, and monitor the realization of the rights and empowerment of women, children, and people with disabilities. This is an articulation of the Equality Clause of our Bill of Rights and the principles and policies of the African National Congress. The country has made great strides in addressing non-racialism, non-sexism, and gender discrimination, and in creating institutions and mechanisms for women's empowerment and gender equality, such as the Commission for Gender Equality. Key international instruments, such as the Beijing Platform for Action, CEDAW, the Protocol on the African Charter on Human and Women's Rights, the African Union Heads of State Protocol on Gender, the SADC Protocol on Gender and Development have all been signed and ratified by this ANC-led government. These have set new benchmarks and targets for government to achieve. In 2000, the South African National Policy Framework for Women's Empowerment and Gender Equality was adopted by Cabinet and became the beacon guiding progress in this regard. It created a vibrant national gender machinery in the country which comprised women from government structures, parliament, the Commission for Gender Equality, and civil society. Honorable Speaker, South Africa's good performance on gender equality is evident both in international and regional indices. On the Social Institute on Gender Index on the OECD, South Africa is ranked 4th out of 87 countries in the 2012 index and was the top-ranked country in Africa. A good story to tell. On the SADC Gender Development Index, South Africa ranked 2nd in 2012 with a score only slightly lower than that of top performer, the Seychelles. On the World Economic Forum Gender Gap Index, South Africa has consistently remained in the upper levels, reaching 6th position in 2011. During South Africa's participation in the 57th session of the UNCSW, Ms. Michelle Bachelet, former Executive Director, UN Women, and now the President of Chile, praised South Africa for the launching of the National Council Against Gender-Based Violence on the 10th of December 2012, acknowledging the strategic day chosen, which was International Human Rights Day. The Executive Director also noted with appreciation the commemoration of World Rural Women's Day in South Africa and urged us to continue to highlight the situation of rural women in our country. She further recognized the proactiveness of the Women's Empowerment and Gender Equality Bill, adding that its success will lie in including all stakeholders, particularly the private sector. Honorable Speaker, one of our greatest achievements in this new democracy since 1994 was the remarkable representation of women in political and decision-making levels, which is a cogent manifestation of the high-level commitment and political will for gender equality and women's empowerment by the ANC government. Before 1994, the South African Parliament was a mere 2.7% women representation. Through the visionary leadership of former President Nelson Mandela and the African National Congress. You'll remember, he always said, I work in a collective. I am led by the collective of the African National Congress. Women representation jumped tenfold to 27% after the 1994 elections. By 1997, we had reached 30% under President Thabo Mbeki after the ANC Mafikeng Conference, which adopted the 30% target on gender. By 1999 and 2004, we had reached 33% representation under President Mbeki. In its Polokwane National Conference in 2007, the ANC adopted the 50-50 representation. This increased the representation of women in parliament to 44% and 42% in cabinet under the leadership of President Jacob Zuma. A good story to tell. Chairperson, the progress our nation is making is mainly due to the commitment of the African National Congress to women empowerment and gender equality. So the women of South Africa, niyazi ukuthi ngubani onilwelayo amalungelo wenu, ngumbutho wesizwe, umbutho ka-National Congress. Khona manje sixoxa ngamalungelo omama kuwejibhili, laba be-DA babhizi balwela big companies because they want the rich to become richer and the poor to become poorer. Once enacted, the Wedgie Bill will become a powerful instrument to advance the objectives of gender equality and women empowerment and enforce compliance on the empowerment of women on the existing legislative framework, both within and outside the public service. To this day, sisalinde i-DA ide ikwethe uminister abemnye aphe Western Cape kugcwele otata uninzi lwabo abamhlophe abagrey bayaphelelwa ngoku apha kule cabinet yalapha eWestern Cape. Mr. President, we have a good story to tell about the gender transformation of our country. We have done very well in various areas. To date, we have 10 DGs who are women in the public service. Today, we have the governor of the Reserve Bank who is a woman. Today, we have the CEO of the JSE who is a woman. We also have the incoming chairperson of the JSE who is a woman. Ayikho i-country emnandi kangaka lelizwe elamakhosikazi. We still have a challenge, Mr. President, in the judiciary. We have not done so well. To date, for instance, we have only 2 women in the Constitutional Court, and that should be addressed as a matter of urgency. We also are doing very badly in the private sector, and therefore would like to ensure that as we work on the bill, the private sector is getting ready to be transformed. Ngoba sizakubatsala, kicking and screaming, bazawulunga nabo. In terms of economic empowerment of women, we've worked with various departments in the economic sector, the DTI, DED, Land Reform and Rural Development, the IDC, SIDA, and other agencies. Imisebenzi bayikhiqizile yo mama. O mama namhlanje they own banamaplazi o mama. O mama bafuyile o mama bayalima. Abanye ngibabonile futhi sebeze bangamamillionaires. phakanyiswa ulo hulumeni wethu. Omama bayasebenza kuma cooperatives, banama feeding scheme, lawo abasizayo ukuthi bakwazi ukwakha imisebenzi nakumphakathi bakhela omama nentsha yethu eSouth Africa. Sithi ke sinabo namhlanje omama nakulezo ndawo kwakukade kuthiwa ezabo baba, sinabo omama namhlanje abakwa mining, sinabo omama namhlanje who are engineers, sinabo omama namhlanje who are in aviation, in the rail sector, in science and technology. Kodwa ke sithi ke siseza uqhubeka kangangoko through training and skills development ukuthi amakhosikazi akhule nawo afikelele kwizinga elifana naminye amakhosikazi kweminye imihlaba. Ama rights amakhosikazi niyayazi imbali ka-African Congress. Noba kwakungu President Mandela, noba kwakungu President Mbeki, that was the African National Congress. Namhlanje sine constitution which is applauded the world over, which has an equality clause in the Bill of Rights, which is the most progressive. Sine Domestic Violence Act of 1998, sine Prevention of Family Violence Act of 1993, sine Homosexual Offences Act, sinabo Pepuda, sinayo nemithetho ye trafficking. Sithi nanji lemithetho futhi iyaluma, iyasebenza. Sibonile izidlwengu nababulali bomama befumana abo 2 life sentence, 1 for rape, 1 for murder. Sithi nalo ujezile uthole 22 years ngokuthwala umntwana wethu. Sijabulisana no family yakhe, sihalelisela no magistrate no judge omsentensile. Sithi nabanye abalandelayo abahambe ekhondweni. We are saying, in fact, these rapists that are taking our children and abusing them under the pretense of culture must actually get tougher sentences. They must get a life sentence because they are raping our children every day. They are taking them out of school and denying them opportunities to grow. President, we also have a good story to tell on the children of South Africa. Namhlanje, the ANC government has ensured that through our policies, budgets, we have education, health, and social security services that are protecting and developing our children. Namhlanje, ECD grade R has doubled from 300,000 a few years ago to over 700,000 children that are benefiting as we speak. And we are saying that we are working hard to ensure more children. In terms of the social security, this has drastically cut poverty, child poverty in South Africa. We have also seen, in terms of the MDGs, we have achieved parity in schools, but also at higher education level. And this one mdege apa, diyazi ukuthi Minister Nzimande sele etyatyathule. We are also aware of the improvement in the matric results. Every year, our children are doing very well. All thanks to the African National Congress government. As far as health is concerned, we want to commend the Minister of Health for lowering mother-to-child transmission by more than 60% in the past 3 years. This has meant that it has moved from 8% to now 2.7%. And this also has ensured that maternal mortality and child mortality has come down in South Africa since this was related to the HIV and AIDS virus. We want also to say on people with disabilities, we have a good story to tell. South Africa has done well post-democracy, in recognizing the rights of persons with disabilities through the Constitution of 1996 and the Integrated National Disability Strategy of 1997. We were one of the first countries to sign and ratify the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability, which we are now realigning through our revised policy, and we will be working on legislation that will assist us to enforce the rights of people with disabilities. Our experiences over the past 20 years have taught us that the right to self-representation holds key to breaking barriers and opening doors to the creation of participatory democratic society. The People with Disabilities slogan is, "Nothing about us without us." Once again, it was the African National Congress which in 1994 walked the talk and became the first party to appoint an MP with disabilities, Ms. Maria Ranto. Today we have 16 members of parliament thanks to the ANC government. And throughout the country, we have 96 public representatives, whether they are councillors or provincial legislators, they are ANC public representatives. We also have 2 deputy ministers in women, children, but also in science and technology, which means amaphone ethu azoba accessible. Children with disability were by and large not welcome in ordinary schools prior to 1994. If a school principal did not want a child, the mother had to see to finish. Today, all children between ages 7 to 15 have to attend school, and this includes children with disabilities. Our education policies, inclusive policies, make sure that children with disabilities are accommodated in local schools. As a result, 94% of children with disabilities between 7 and 15 are enrolled in schools compared to 73% in 2002. Accessible transport is perhaps one of the most important enablers of persons with disabilities to ensure they can access education and work opportunities.
Thank
the
you,
cooperation
Honourable Minister,
received
your time
and the
is
sterling
up.
work done by the Department of Transport in instituting universal design access in BRT programs needs to be commended. I thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Honourable Dreyer.
Madam Deputy Speaker, as I'm speaking in Afrikaans today, members will have the opportunity to follow me in any of the other languages through our brand new electronic systems. Sedert antieke Griekeland regeer 'n demokratiese en doeltreffende regering op 'n eerlike wyse met minimum korrupsie en met professionele finansiële bestuur. Op die 3 sake fokus ek vandag. In elke staatsrede maak president Zuma beloftes oor korrupsie. In 2010, we have repeatedly stated our commitment to fight corruption in the public service. We will intensify the fight against crime and corruption. In 2011, the fight against corruption continues. En in 2013 hoor ons ook hy sien korrupsie as 'n knelpunt. Maar die Wêreldbank bevind egter die Zuma-regering se beheer oor korrupsie het tussen 2009 en 2012 met 10% verswak. En volgens Transparency International het skoon regering onder president Zuma oor die laaste 8 jaar met 30 punte gedaal. Reeds 5 jaar lank hoor ons dat tenderpreneurs vasgevat gaan word. Nou skielik met 'n sogenaamde sentrale tenderraad. Intussen het die DA-regering in die Wes-Kaap tenderkomitees reeds lankal vir die publiek oopgestel met groot sukses. Trouwens, terwyl die DA-regering in die Wes-Kaap al in 2010 'n wet aanneem wat staatsamptenare verbied om besigheid met die regering te doen, kry die Zuma binnekring staatskontrakte soos byvoorbeeld die argitek Menenhle Makanya vir Nakantla. Voorts, 'n kernvaardigheid van 'n doeltreffende owerheid is professionele finansiële bestuur. Op 13 Februarie spog president Zuma in sy staatsrede, hy regeer die land al hoe beter. Maar wat is die waarheid? Volgens die ouditeur-generaal Kimi Makwetu eskaleer die Zuma-regering se wanbesteding sedert die vorige finansiële jaar met 33%. Makwetu bevind ook, regeringsdepartement het die afgelope finansiële jaar meer as 2000 miljoen rand op vrugtelose en vermorste wyse spandeer en 'n verdere 26 miljoen rand onreëlmatig bestee. Op 13 Februarie beweer president Zuma ook, "We have built strong institutions of democracy." Maar volgens die ouditeur-generaal Kimi Makwetu verontagsaam 93% van nasionale departemente finansiële regulasies. Ek herhaal, 93% van departemente verontagsaam regulasies. En die spesiale ondersoekeenheid skat dat tot 30.000 miljoen rand elke jaar verlore gaan weens korrupsie in regeringsaankope. Met hierdie 30.000 miljoen rand wat lede van die Zuma-regime vermors en steel, kan die DA-regering in die Wes-Kaap elke jaar 162.000 nuwe onderwysers aanstel en beurse aan 500.000 studente betaal. Trouwens, volgens die beoordeling deur die onafhanklike grondwetlike instelling, die South African Institute of Government Auditors, laas jaar was 7 uit 10 van die topbestuurde provinsiale departemente in die Wes-Kaap. Dus is die Wes-Kaap in 2013 die best regeerde provinsie in Suid-Afrika. Ter samevatting, terwyl elke staatsrede beloftes maak, misken 93% staatsdepartemente finansiële regulasies en gaan 30.000 miljoen rand van ons belasting elke jaar verlore weens korrupsie. Madam Deputy Speaker, dalk lê die kern van wanbestuur by die kern van die regering, by nommer 1. Ondanks 5 amptswonings word meer as 200 miljoen rand van die publiek se geld aan sy privaat woning by Nakantla spandeer, vir veiligheid. Jy's mos veiliger met liggies, struike en 'n beeskraal. Jy's mos veiliger met 'n nuwe gimnasium net vir jouself. En jy's die heel veiligste in 'n reuse swembad. 3.6 miljoen rand van die publiek se geld word gebruik om te keer dat spionasiebande met die ware feite oor hom vrygestel word. 783 klagtes is teen hom ingedien vir geldwasery, bedrog en korrupsie. Die kern in hierdie nes van korrupsie is meneer Jacob Zuma.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Makloa.
Deputy Speaker, what an honor it is to have a response after the President's State of the Nation address. It was an address that was the story of a president who has failed to deliver on his promises. I cannot agree more with you, Mr. President, that South Africa is indeed a better place since 1994, but is South Africa a better place since 2009, when President Zuma first assumed office? That is the real question here today. That is the question South Africans are asking in their homes across the country. And the answer is no, Deputy Speaker. The story of Zuma's ANC since 2009 is not a good story. During President Zuma's term, it has never been more difficult to find employment. Speaker, in his speech, President Zuma said, and I quote, "Our country still faces the triple challenge of poverty, inequality and unemployment, which we continue to grapple with," unquote. But what is his plan to deal with it? if that is true. He provides none in his speech except for the creation of opportunities. Mr. Speaker, our people want dignity of a real job. Where is the plan to combat corruption, which is the major source of the unemployment in this country? I am not surprised that there isn't one, Mr. Speaker, because he has no credibility to speak to South Africans on corruption. South Africans only see the palace of Nkandla when he speaks of corruption. The Honorable President has told us a story of Transnet, new multi-product pipeline, but Minister Nzimandi, the part of the story that our President has not told us is that work on this project began in 2008. It was meant to be completed in 2010. It was initially budgeted at 9.5 billion rand. It has been delayed for 3 years at a cost more than doubled from 9 billion rand to 23.4 billion rand. A review on the systematic failures of this project was completed late last year. Until now, no information on the cost overruns of 14 billion rand and the delay of 3 years has been made public to us. Honorable Likota, if you calculate the fruitless expenditure that you have mentioned here today, it's worth more than 70 billion rand that has gone down the drain in President Zuma's term due to unauthorized, irregular, fruitless and wasteful spending by government departments and public entities. Instead, the President boasted last week, "I have a good story to tell," and I quote, "Government has recovered more than 320 million. 320 million from perpetrators through the National Anti-Corruption Hotline," unquote. 70 billion is still gone, Mr. President. Imali ipelile. This actually reminds me of a story written by Hans Christian Andersen about two weavers who promised an emperor a new suit. But the emperor's new clothes were invisible. He was blind to his nakedness, and the only people could see him for what he truly was. South Africa cannot be fooled. We shall be among those to remind the emperor of his failures. And Mr. Speaker, if we want to talk about decorum in this house, then we must be able to carry the proverbial flag. If President Zuma's record is something to go by, this state of the nation should be President Zuma's last. That would indeed be a good story to tell. I thank you.
Honorable Olomisa.
Good story, good story. The Chairperson, Minister, Honorable President, Deputy President, and Honorable Members. Amalala, Litine Linkanjane, Lingu Blade. Thank you, Mr. President, for sending Minister Chabane to help the Walter Sisulu University students, whilst that confused communist was busy at a certain rehabilitation center being helped to deal with his addiction to one of the whiskey products. Mr. President, allow me to apologize in advance for not being able to stay for the entire duration of this debate.
Sorry, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
There's a point of order, Honorable.
I think the Honorable Member make an insinuation about the Honorable Minister.
It's an insinuation, Uchona. I didn't accuse you.
He's making a serious allegation against the Minister of Higher Education in terms of the rehabilitation of one of the brands of whiskey.
Go and investigate.
That is not parliamentary, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Can you please rule on that?
Honorable Olomis.
Yes?
You know where you must make those allegations.
I thought you would go back and consult with your advisors and then come back to the House and tell us.
Honorable Olomis.
Okay, I withdraw.
Thank you very much.
Mr. President, allow me to apologize in advance for not being able to stay for the entire duration of this debate. I have to go to Pretoria to finalize the submission of the Defence Force Service Commission to the Portfolio Committee on Defence. I also need to prepare for my trip to Bloemfontein to attend the National Defence Force Day celebration. I hope you understand, sir, because you assigned me and others in this country this task. Deputy Speaker, the 2014 State of the Nation Address debate takes place at a time when South Africa marks 20 years of freedom. This gives us an opportunity to reflect on the progress made and the challenges facing South Africa today. We acknowledge the good strides made since the attainment of our freedom. We also fully concur with you, Mr. President, that South Africa is a better place to live in today than it was before 1994. However, contrary to popular belief, many South Africans do not have a good story to tell about our 20 years of freedom. Millions of South Africans in townships, rural and peri-urban areas still do not have access to land, houses, water, and sanitation. Even in instances where service deliveries have been delivered, the quality of the final product leaves much to be desired. As we speak, government has to demolish and rebuild thousands of poorly built RDP houses around the country. There is also a general lack of maintenance of the existing infrastructure in many previously disadvantaged communities, which negatively affect the delivery of water and electricity. While the UDM acknowledges the impact of colonial and apartheid legacy on the South African economy, 20 years into our democracy, there is clear evidence that poor economic policy choices, economic mismanagement, and corruption have negatively affected our economy. Furthermore, over the last 20 years, we have witnessed growing levels of tension and mistrust among these three main role players, that is government, labor, and business. On the one hand, this mistrust has discouraged big business from investing billions of available cash in our economy. On the other hand, it has often resulted in illegal, violent strikes, which negatively affect the economy, depress the currency, and investor sentiment. These strained and often volatile industrial relations have resulted in high unemployment rates. Millions of South Africans are unemployed, the majority of which are youth, while others live in abject poverty. Rising food prices and fuel costs have added to the misery by making it difficult for many South Africans to make ends meet. What adds insult to injury is that our education system fails to give our children the basic education they need to be economically active. In the meantime, levels of inequality increase at an alarming rate. The high levels of inequality are a direct result of corruption and policies that allow the rich to accumulate obscene wealth at the expense of the poor and marginalized. The most painful irony, however, is that of a former liberation movement that espoused egalitarian principles during the struggle years only to preside over the most grotesque and ever-worsening levels of inequality. Government has, over the past 20 years, taken decisions that have caused the country much embarrassment. Some of these decisions and transactions, which were laced with corruption, include, but are not limited to, Sarafina II, you'll remember, the arms deal, Hitachi Chancellor House ESCOM deal, Dynapolis saga, the IEC and South African Police Service lease agreement scandals, Nkandla Gate scandal, and so on and so on. Whilst talking about the Nkandla Gate scandal, Mr. President, we have noted your media comments over the past weekend regarding government spending of millions of taxpayers' money on your private property. There is no doubt that this scandal has brought the country into disrepute. You keep telling us that you had no knowledge of these improvements, but you never tell us what steps you have taken to solve this fiasco. Mr. President, had it not been for the media that exposed this scandal, there would have been no public works and public protector investigations. We are concerned that in cases where senior ruling party leaders are caught with their hands in the cookie jar, junior officials are always made to take the blame. Even former President Mandela admitted to the widespread existence of corruption in the ruling party when he said in August 1998, I quote, "We have learned now that even those people with whom we fought the struggle against apartheid's corruption can themselves be corrupted." Close quote. Mr. President, it seems other South Africans have a different story to tell. No one can dispute that corruption destroys the gains of our freedom. It also chases away the investors. Bearing this in mind, government needs to take active steps to promote and entrench a culture of good governance.
Well, that's all we have time for on this special broadcast of the debate on the State of the Nation address that was delivered by President Jacob Zuma on Thursday last week. We'll bring you highlights of this debate in our parliamentary news program, A View from the House, tomorrow morning just after 8. The debate itself will continue in the National Assembly tomorrow afternoon, with President Zuma delivering his reply on Thursday. But from us here today, it's good afternoon.
Zange banazindlela kodwa babesincedisile ngelaxesha sasithi makulwele inkululeko masikhululeke sincediseni uANC. Namhlanje akukho kwanto yenziweyo. Sikubhala ke mhlekazi siyabulela kule line osivulele yona. Ndizobrief as members thanda ukuhlala apha singazinto. La line siyayisebenzisa.
As the Transport Minister, I've heard them. I must at the onset apologize to those of our road users in Gauteng and indeed the general public that have been inconvenienced by these challenges.
We do apologize unreservedly for those people who have suffered the inconvenience, especially for those whose records and that we don't have.
Of our road users in Gauteng and indeed the general public that have been inconvenienced by these challenges.
We do apologize unreservedly for those people who have suffered the inconvenience, especially for those whose records and that we don't have.
Nazir Ali will be doing the presentation. Thank you.
You say.
Thank you, Chair. And
as the Transport Minister, I've heard them. I must at the onset apologize to those of our road users.
We do apologize unreservedly for those people who have suffered the inconvenience, especially for those whose records and that we don't have.
As the Transport Minister, I've heard them. I must at the onset apologize to those of our road users in Gauteng and indeed the general public that have been inconvenienced by these challenges.
We do apologize unreservedly for those people who have suffered the inconvenience, especially for those whose records and that we don't have.
Nazir Ali will be doing the presentation. Thank you.
The usage of provinces, the number of pedestrians throughout our provinces, passengers and drivers. Throughout the presentation, Chairperson will then realize that in all provinces.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for inviting us to share with you our system. We've now been deployed for. So what we'll do is we have realized, and we have realized that obviously any system that we deploy will have
a knee replacement operation. And we also have an apology from Honorable Daga, who is also not well. We have with us, we have invited.
Thank you very much, Chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Transport, Comrade Ruth Bengu, the Chairperson Miaka from Sanral, as well as Mr. Majavu from RTMC. Chairperson SGF. Please also accept my apology, Chairperson, for having to depart from this meeting early because, as you would have noted in the...
Ask the questions that are more, that the Minister only can answer. We now have proof that those police figures which you or your predecessor reported on are not right. And I'll tell you what the proof is. Minister, so clearly the police missed two, or they're still in progress, or something's gone wrong. Will the Minister not concede that those police figures are not absolutely accurate and that we need to get... And you said you can't just shut it down, there's a legal process. You have to deal with laws that were passed by Parliament, Cabinet has to have a say and so on. But now
Tackling the burden of disease. These vaccinations inform that process. The World Health Organization has advised that the Tackling the burden of disease. These vaccinations inform that process. The World Health Organization has advised that the vaccine be administered before a woman becomes sexually active.
We have selected the
Tackling the burden of disease. These vaccinations inform that process. The World Health Organization has advised that the vaccine be administered before a woman becomes sexually active.
We have selected the grade 4 girls. That means those who are in grade 4 in every public school. And in March, we are going to launch a vaccination program for them. And this
Human papillo or HPV is the virus which leads to cancer of the cervix. It's the second biggest killer of women in South Africa after breast cancer.
even under the best care, whether they go to a